How are you doing there, Mr. Del Paulo?
Hello?
Hey, Mike, it's Jim McCarthy. How you been?
Good. How about you?
Doing well.
This is my first Zoom meeting ever. I don't know what I'm doing here, but I guess I'll work my way through it.
Yeah, I don't think your project's really a high discussion item today. It should. Are you actually? We looked at the plan. Are you even in at all in the borough? It looks like you're totally in Cumberland and Reading.
Well, fortunately, you got one of your nice, beautiful monuments there where it's shown on the plan, and it's about 1 foot inside the property line.
Oh, geez.
So we're looking at about 39 and a half square feet of the property inside the borough.
Yeah. Well, I can't speak for the PC, but I don't think anyone's real concerned about that.
I'm sorry,
Finally.
I don't think that should be a big issue today.
I wouldn't think so.
We were actually, I'm glad you said that because when Michelle Bear and I were looking at the plan, we didn't notice that. So that makes sense. Why, if there's a monument a foot in.
Hi, everybody. You guys hear me? Hello? Anybody?
Yep, we can hear you.
That's weird. Hello? No? Oh my. Hello, hello?
We can hear you, Adrian.
Nope. Melissa, you don't hear me?
I can hear you.
I think you're talking, but I don't hear you. Okay, I'm gonna try again.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
Hello?
Hello. Hi, Melissa, you guys hear me now?
We can hear
I
you.
can hear. I can hear.
I usually don't have IT problems. Okay.
Mike Del Paulo.
Yes.
I just talked to Michelle. We're gonna put you in as like 3A, between 3 and 4. Okay,
Okay.
on the agenda. So you don't have to wait till the end.
All right. I don't know. This is my first Zoom meeting ever, so tell me what to do.
Well, we'll cover it when it gets to that.
Mike,
Okay.
I gave Keith Mooney and John Muir the login information, so they may be joining us as well.
So Mike, this is John Woodward speaking, the chair. What is this in reference to?
The Hummingbird Hill, Wyomissing Park Apartments, annexation subdivision. It's almost entirely in the city of Reading, but a tiny little sliver up in the extreme western corner.
Hold it. May I interrupt you right there? Why don't we wait till the regular meeting and we can hear everybody? Everybody can hear you out.
Okay,
Thank you.
John, I just told Mike that because we didn't have him specifically on the agenda when he first logged in earlier. So,
Oh, that's okay.
Hey, John.
Yes,
Hey, John, can you hear me?
yes. Is it Ron?
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if anybody said this before, but as you're well aware, before your council meetings, you get a packet of information to review before the council.
Yeah.
I think it would be helpful that if we're going to have 27-page zoning documents and 32-page reviews of development plans, that they send a packet out to us so we don't have to run around either trying to do two things with the agenda and the video of all of us and look at these documents on a Mac laptop versus having the documents in advance so we can at least see the 27 pages. Because if we try to read them on a computer while we're going through them, it's kind of difficult. And I know it poses a difficulty of making copies, but we do that and you get 3 inches worth of paper before you come to the meeting. And when we do them like on a Zoom call, there's very little time to digest all those documents on a computer because the print is so small, and unless you print them out, if you don't have a printer at your house, then you got to run over to Staples and, it's somewhat time consuming to be as prepared as we'd like to be, knowing that some of you guys have reviewed these documents because you're part of the whole process. Those of us that aren't have to catch up pretty fast, and we don't have the benefit of having been part of the review process in the beginning. Does that make any sense?
It does make sense.
I'd just like to add, Ron, everything we're discussing today besides Hummingbird Hill was emailed out a week ago.
That's
It
what
was-
I thought.
It was sent out February 1st. So, I mean,
I know
we can
that's the whole
gladly
pro-
get you paper copies in the future. But I know Melissa and I strive to get the agenda out, best case scenario, a week in advance, so everybody has time.
I have all that, but I don't really feel like reading 27-page, a new zoning variance about wireless transmitters on my Mac laptop. It's pretty small. And when you start looking at plans, copies of plans on an 8 by 10-inch screen, it's really difficult to, but yeah, I've gotten all this stuff. I just can't even read it on my computer because it's so small. You really need a piece of paper that you can see it and you can put it up to your face and not have to, I mean, it's the same principle. I mean, you're not emailing everything to Borough Council and expecting people to read 300 pages. So why should the people on the Planning Commission have to read 100?
Yo, do you like Lego Batman?
I'm sorry?
Somebody just said something.
Somebody said something
What was
about
it?
Batman.
Yeah.
You might have got Zoom bombed.
What?
Yeah, that's what happened. Melissa took care of it.
Okay, well, let's call the meeting to order.
All right.
Is there any public comment? I guess we
Mich-
consider yours, Ron, public comment, even though you're a member of the committee.
Mr. Chairman, this is Keith Mooney speaking.
Yes.
I don't see my matter on the agenda, but I had discussed it with Michelle and sent out correspondence to Michelle and Chris with regard to seeking a waiver of subdivision and land development review for a project that has a small sliver in the borough of Wyomissing.
Keith, I'm gonna bring you up after number 3. We already talked
Okay.
that before you hopped on the call.
No problem.
Okay. Any other public comment? All right, Berkshire Mall West, do you want to orchestrate this, Michelle?
Sorry, I was muted, Mr. Chairman. I apologize. I was talking and I was muted.
So go ahead, Ed.
I have a public comment.
Go ahead.
Say again? Okay,
Go ahead.
thank you. So regarding, yes, do you hear me now?
Yes.
Hear you.
Yes. Regarding Berkshire Mall West situation, I've spoken about it before, and I want to say a few words. I am operating only off Google Maps here and the plan that was submitted at the last meeting. So if anything has changed, I don't have it. First of all, as I said before, I'm going to say it again. I think it's a bad idea that we introduce another entry there. There are just a lot of entries in a very short on a very short distance, and I understand the need. I mean, I understand that they want this, but I think that this is going to raise more problems than it solves.
Well,
So,
that
like I said,
that
Go ahead.
feature is going away. Is that correct, Michelle?
The intersection, no, the left turn lane in, yes.
Is that what you're referring to, Mr. Jadik, the left turn? That's what you brought up at the last meeting.
Well, yes and no. Yeah, first of all, the fourth leg of that intersection, that's the first thing, and I understand that stays, right?
You had to what?
I'm referring to the fourth leg of that intersection, the one that goes to Outback.
Right.
So, and again, now since we're at it, I have to say what I've said many times. I think that these public comments, in order for them to have any meaning, they should, you guys should allow them, you know, when the maps are up, because if we operate off old maps and old information, then it becomes a futile exercise. But I'm gonna say my thing now, and so the first problem is the leg itself, which adds a bottleneck there. This is gonna be a very, very complicated intersection. So the leg that comes from the actual Berkshire Mall is allowed to do a left turn and a right turn, while this other one is not. So we can look at it both ways. If one is allowed, why isn't the other? Now, the one coming from the actual Berkshire Mall was allowed to turn left because there was no fourth leg before. It was a T intersection before, and it wasn't such a big deal. Now, when we introduce a fourth leg, it's going to be people turning everywhere. They're going to be the middle lane turning left into Outback. These other guys are turning back into Woodland Road. So to me, I don't think this is a good idea. You say that traffic engineers looked at it. I don't see it. And again, the people coming from Outback enter that a stretch of curved road. It's a lane, not even knowing that they have to turn right. It's a right turn only lane. That again has a problem. So they're going to enter, and at the end of the lane, they're going to see the arrow say, okay, shit, pardon my French. Now what do I do? So the way it is presented in the last plan, like I said, I'm an engineer. There are a lot of things I don't like. And like I said, Woodland Road is a mess. Whenever you have Christmas or any holidays or any high shopping times, adding this, complication right here is not going to serve any purpose. I don't think anybody really looked at it to make the traffic more fluent. So I think, we either look at it deeper. I mean, we can put some, like I said, some lights or something. I don't see how this is going to avoid problems in that intersection. And like I said, I don't see why one leg is allowed left and right turns while the other leg is not. It makes absolutely no sense. There's to me, there's no reason not to allow a left turn coming from out back. So anyway, that's it. I will listen to the meeting and we'll see how it goes. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Michelle, you want to walk us through the Berkshire Mall West? And Mr. Jadik, what my takeaway from our last meeting was that you didn't like the left turn off of Woodland Road into, you say, Outback or Burlington or whatever it is, and that has been eliminated. And I understand your other concerns, and I drove it myself, and I'm not an engineer, obviously, but you make reference of you can't, when a busy times of the year around Christmas or whatever, well, it's like a restaurant.
Right.
You don't size the size of the kitchen to prepare for New Year's Eve because it only happens once a year. But that may not be a direct comparison, but
but you still have to feed the people. But anyway, to correct, because you misunderstood me, I was referring off the same thing I said today, people coming from Outback, so exiting the parking lot,
they
have
go
to
right.
turn right only.
Gotcha.
Correct. While the people coming from the actual Berkshire Mall, the other leg, the opposite leg, they can turn left and right. It just doesn't make sense to me. So now you're saying that people coming off Woodland Road, and that was not my comment last time. I did not object because I understand the reason that, the Burlington Coat Factory wants people to be able to come in. Okay, fine. But so now that is dead. So yeah, that'll become more fluent. I understand. Okay, well, yeah, it helps.
Thank you.
Anyway,
We're going to move on with the agenda, and
yeah,
we
Go
heard
ahead.
your comments.
yes.
Go ahead, Michelle.
So I'm actually going to turn it over to Kim Fosnut, the engineer from Spot Stevenson McCoy, to present the plan that you're looking at with some obvious revisions, including the removal of the left turn lane in off of Woodland Road, since the Planning Commission looked at this at their January meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you. So as you can see by the plan that Michelle is sharing on her screen, based on guidance received from TPD, we have revised the plan to remove the left turn into the site. So we essentially blocked, can you scroll down a little bit so I can see the intersection for Berkshire Mall? So what we did is we extended the median so that it lined up with the left-hand turn lane so that you were prohibiting that cross movement across from Berkshire Mall, as well as preventing that left-hand turn in. So that was the main revision. There were some grading revisions that needed to occur as a result of that. And we've also removed the left-hand lane along Woodland Road going into the site, Berkshire West site. So at this time, I'd like to discuss just a few comments. Those were the only real plan changes that were on the plan set of note. I'd just like to review a few of the comments that were on McCarthy's letter, as well as as TPD's letter. So the first comment I want to review is regarding the screening for the trash compactor on the backside of the building. The proposed trash compactor is right next to the loading dock on the back portion of the property. And there is currently a grade separation. There's an embankment that's probably about 10 to 12 feet high. And then on top of that embankment, there is a row of evergreen shrubs or trees, excuse me. So I needed clarification on exactly what we would be screening, as there already is screening proposed against that property line, or existing screening across the back of that property line.
Kim,
And
I
this
don't
is
wanna- Sorry, Kim, I didn't want to jump in for Jim. Craig Bonenberger and I talked last week because
okay.
this was kind of a duplicate comment. It's required by the zoning ordinance and the saldo.
Mhm.
If you're proposing to use that existing vegetation that's there for screening, I would ask at the very least for some type of, exhibit, picture, something be included or sent to the borough that, we can review that and see what it looks like.
Oh, sure. So would I just send that to your attention then? I have a picture already that demonstrates the large evergreen trees on top of the embankment. So should I just send that to you via email?
Yep, that's perfect.
Okay.
Are we supposed to be looking at something we're talking about, or is just a piece of paper with the waiver request and a development review on it? Is there a visual of this compactor site that you have that's further down the list of documents we have here?
That's one of the,
Okay.
sorry, Kim. I was gonna say, that's one of the things Craig and I requested be submitted is dimensions and details for the trash compactor. So no, we do not have that yet, Ron.
Okay,
Yeah, I have that information now, Michelle. I will send that to you as well as the existing screening.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem. Stormwater management, there was a new comment regarding the capacity of the existing downstream storm sewer. Our engineers have evaluated that and will be providing updated calculations and also some replacement of pipes to accommodate the flows. This was a dated system installed many years ago. So obviously stormwater regulations has changed, and we are taking a look at that and will provide adequate pipe downstream piping. So that was in relation to stormwater comment D1. We also will be providing the handicap and the emergency access. We'll be working with legal counsel to show something on our plans with that and a note, appropriate note. So just for everyone else's information, Michelle, the applicant, and Jim McCarthy and I all met on site last week, I believe, to review where the access easement was going to go in the back portion of the property. The applicant has agreed to what they were proposing, so that will need to be reflected on our plans and appropriate notes shown. Okay, so at that point, I think we took care of all of the rest of McCarthy's review comments were more administrative in nature. So I want to go over to TPD's comments. So do you have those, Michelle, or no?
Sorry, it would help if I unmuted myself. I thought I had sent Melissa TPD's review letter. Apparently not. Give me 1 second.
Okay. I think it would be helpful
So
to have them up.
there's a beer in my hand.
Are you talking about the ADA submission? Yes. No.
February 4th, 2021.
Yes. Hold on. Melissa, I just sent it to you.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were sharing your screen, not.
No, I'm not, sorry.
All right. I can share my screen if
Uh-oh.
that's allowed.
Hello, everybody.
Sure. On here.
Is it okay if I share my screen?
Yep, there you go. Now you have host properties.
All right. Let me know if you can see that.
See a black line.
Yeah, nice black line.
That's not the intended. Interesting. Any luck now?
There we
Yes.
go. Yep.
Okay, there we go. I tell you, I have the worst problems with this. All right, so these are TPD's comments that we received from February 4th. Comment number 1, they're calling out some plan markups that we received from TPD. And our intention is to work through these with TPD in order to provide a middle ground for some of these comments. As we feel the design as presented achieves the objectives of the no left-hand turn. So we're gonna work with TPD in order to kind of come up with something that we can both agree upon, because this would require some regrading and redesign on our end, and we kind of want to come to a common ground on that one. So John has started those conversations. John is our traffic consultant. He started those conversations, and we'll probably further discuss those unless we wanted to bring those up at this point.
And Kim, maybe I'll just jump in here. John Witchner with McMahon Associates. I've had a conversation with the borough's traffic consultant, traffic planning and design today. Understanding that that the final design will be a right in, right out driveway based upon probably coordination with the borough's traffic engineer since October of last year. We understand that's where it's that's where the geometry is going to fall. The only, I guess, things that Kim is referencing is there are some revisions that TPD has asked for that, from a minor perspective, conflict with some drainage design for the driveway. And so, it really is just an opportunity to satisfy TPD's review letter that the final design may not look exactly like this from a dimensional standpoint, but the intent would be to satisfy TPD's review letter. Certainly a restriction from traffic from Berkshire Mall across the street to Berkshire Mall West. That is being accomplished. No left in, that is being accomplished. Proper signage, proper median sizes, things of that nature, that will all be addressed. We just want to interface with TPD on a balancing act of some drainage items and the geometry. So those conversations are underway.
Right. So one of the comments that I wanted to have a discussion about was regarding it's comment number 5, which is requiring we submit CS 4401 and TIF forms where appropriate for all ADA ramps, not just the ones that are under PennDOT jurisdiction. Now, when questioning this is not typical in all the other municipalities that I've worked in. We have not gotten this for non-PennDOT ramps, providing this for non-PennDOT ramps. And we feel as though our original submission did not include blow up or enlarged plans of the ramps, but we will be providing those just to demonstrate that they are compliant. And we feel as though that in providing those enlarged plans like we have in the past to the borough, we would be demonstrating that we do meet federal guidelines for ADA accessibility. So as this is an ordinance requirement, TPD is suggesting that they aren't going to remove this comment. However, they are suggesting that if you are so inclined, you could waive this comment addressing this comment. So basically, they're forms that are typically done for a PennDOT submission. They're construction forms noting slopes and everything. And then TIFs are technically infeasible forms, which document anywhere that you're not compliant with PennDOT regulations. So we are requesting to not provide these documents for any non-PennDOT ramps. We will provide those for PennDOT ramps where required.
Kim, this is Scott Miller. I have a question. This comment, is this applying to the new ramps that you're proposing to modify or put
All
in?
ramps.
All the ramps that abut the property?
All ramps that we are proposing.
Oh, that you're proposing, okay. Regardless if it's on a PennDOT road or not.
Correct.
Then my question to Michelle is this something typical that the borough requires?
So I posed that question back to Greg Richardson, and I mean, I'm sure Eric, if he's on, I thought I saw him earlier, could weigh in on this as well, as he also works for TPD. The response I got, and I mean, I also talked this over with Jim McCarthy, is this is something that TPD does for all of their private clients and requires for all of their municipal reviews. We, the borough, also had to do this for PennDOT as part of our application for 4th Street. But Kim is correct, it is not an ordinance requirement. I mean, I can't point to a section in an ordinance that says you as an applicant must do this.
Okay, but the borough's not going to get in trouble for not doing this if it's not on a PennDOT road, correct?
That's my understanding, correct?
Okay.
I have a question for Kim. Are you gonna have any TIFs? I'm more concerned about the TIFs than the CS.
No, we're not gonna have TIFs. No, they're all compliant.
Okay. That's really the concern, that there's a ramp that you're modifying and it can't comply, and then down the road, we have some type of issue and we don't have it documented as technically a feasible ramp.
Absolutely. But I think by us providing those enlarged plans, which will show the slopes, you will be able to see clearly that we meet all the minimum slopes, distances, widths, and all the things that come along with the curb ramps. And providing those, I think that would capture that documentation.
Yeah, I'd like to comment. This is Eric. You know, the ADA, for those that recall, is a pretty sensitive issue to me. You know, we design them all the time. And my concern is, you know, they're in the borough right of way, these ramps. And, you know, as long as we're covered legally with anything that's infeasible, like Jim said, I'm fine with that. But, you know, I don't, you know, want to disregard something that may be a liability issue if it could be in the future. So, you know, that's my stance on it. You know, I know that McMahon requires them in all the municipalities they represent, that I do work on their local roads. So, you know, it's not an unheard of request.
So do you want to weigh in, Chris?
Well, my question is a practical one. What does it take to comply with this note? I mean, how much of a lift is it for the developer?
So I'm estimating probably a half hour per ramp. We have 9 ramps, not including the PennDOT intersection. So that's probably around 5 hours, 4.5 to 5 hours. But my worry is, like, this isn't something I ever had brought up. I mean, we did this Buffalo Wild Wings. We came before, provided the enlarged handicap ramp details, and didn't need to provide this documentation in the borough before. You know, we had compliant ramps, there was no issues, and this was never asked of us before. This is the first time I've ever been asked for to provide CS 4401. And I mean, on this one, it's not a huge ask, but let's say we had to redo all of them and that came to 30 ramps. That would be a big ask of the client. And we already are documenting by way of showing on an enlarged plan that we are compliant.
Let me ask another question for our engineer. If you know the answer, Jim, have we been consistently applying, or has our traffic engineer been consistently applying this note in the reviews that we have received since this traffic engineer has been regularly doing plan reviews for the borough?
This is probably the first project that they've done a traffic review of where the adjoining roads weren't all PennDOT roads. But in those cases, they did ask for them, as did PennDOT. So I think this is the first time it's come up where we are dealing with PennDOT road and a borough road on a project where there was the level of improvement being done and it went to the traffic consultant.
And to add to that, the Buffalo Wild Wings plan was reviewed prior to the borough engaging in a contract with the traffic engineer, which is probably why it did not come up then.
So I have two questions. If the if the addition of this note is being debated, is there a benefit that would be inherent to the project? Is it something that we should be looking at? And if we don't put the note in, I mean, it really comes down to, is there a reason to have this information in there and then obviously follow up and do what the note says we should do? Or is there no reason why we should have it and there's no potential blowback later that we should have done it? I mean, it all seems to be related to, number one, is there a reason to have it? And number two, if we say, well, you can do it or not do it, should we really be thinking about doing it because it makes sense? Or are we going to have to deal with something down the road where we didn't do it because we didn't have to do it, but we should have done it? Does that make any sense?
Well, there's a hypothetical risk to the borough. This is a curb ramp in the public right of way of the borough road. And if it's not at the appropriate standard, there is a risk that some person who needs to have access because of their handicap condition, and if they can show that the design of the ramp was inappropriate and resulted in some problem for them, that could come back against the borough. So it's a speculative kind of risk. I mean, it's not one, I haven't had the experience in the borough of a lot of complaints about handicap accessibility, but that could be because the borough's been doing a good job of ensuring that we try to keep up with the appropriate standards. I guess my feeling is that if the borough has engaged a traffic engineering firm to advise us on plan reviews, that we should do our best to take those recommendations into consideration. And from what Kim has said, it doesn't seem to me in this particular project that there is an excessively burdensome impact on the developer.
So does that mean we do take an action or take no action?
I'm recommending that my recommendation to council is that you follow the advice of your traffic engineer and require this improvement as part of this project.
Well, we're always going to be installing the improvement. That's not a question. It's whether we're going to provide the additional CS 4401 forms or TIFs if applicable. We always are. And then, obviously the borough is going to be inspecting those curb ramps to make sure they meet the design guidelines as well. So the question isn't whether we're going to be upgrading the ramps, it's whether we're going to be providing extra documentation, and then just an understanding as a consultant whether this is going to be required going forward on all projects. Because like I said, it could be a huge endeavor for additional, if there's a large number of ramps. And just to be clear, is this also on private property? Because there are 3 ramps that are located on the applicant's property. And the way I read this, it's for all ADA ramps. Now that would extend, onto non-borough ramps as well.
I don't believe the CS 4401s are applicable except when they're along a roadway, whether municipal, private, or PennDOT. When you're dealing with the on-site ramps, you're dealing with the ADA standards of accessibility in the parking areas and the buildings typically.
Again, I can't read the note very well. I'm having the same problem Ron is. Thank you.
Sorry.
But with regard to, the difference between the paperwork versus the improvement, it seems to me that the paperwork is part of the improvement in a sense, in that it's part of the documentation of the compliance of the ramp with the applicable regulations. So to that extent, my advice is still the same to the Planning Commission about requiring the paperwork to be completed along with the improvement.
It would appear to me that if we're looking at this project based on the Berkshire Mall and the Berkshire Mall West or whatever it is across the street where the Burlington wants to go, that the risk is directly related to the potential flow of ADA traffic across Woodland Road. And if the Berkshire Mall turns out to be another Amazon processing center, the amount of ADA accessibility might not be great. But if that's the reason why we don't think we have to do it, the other possibility is it becomes King of Prussia East, where there's a lot of ADA potential issues. So I think Chris is probably on the money here, because you really don't have any idea. Right now, the number of people crossing the street there to go to TJ Maxx or whatever else is over there at the moment is probably, one person a month needs ADA accessibility there. But if it turns out to be something more useful to the public, be they in vehicles or walking across the street, it seems like the issue becomes greater. So if you have it, you have it, and it solves the problem regardless of what goes on over there.
Do you agree with that, Chris? That's what you were saying, correct?
Yeah, that's, as I understand Ron's comment, yes, we're in agreement.
And how do we accomplish that? Is that just something Michelle can handle, or do we need to do something from the Planning Commission?
Well, given the extensive discussion we've had on it, I would recommend a motion from the Planning Commission to indicate to the developer Planning Commission's desire to have that comment complied with.
Would somebody make that motion?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion?
I do want to bring something else up that was brought up. We kind of started discussing it in the last Planning Commission meeting. That's somewhat related to this comment. The Woodland Road and Ridgewood Ave, they're asking for new ramps in that area, which the applicant is on board with providing. However, this would require PennDOT review. And as you're all aware, this project is under a tight timeline, and PennDOT can be rather lengthy in the review process. So we are requesting that this be deferred or somehow not tied to the project so that we can go ahead and move forward with the construction of the actual driveway and then maybe post escrow or something in order to allow that to kind of be separate and run its own course so that this project isn't tied into that approval and the PennDOT cycles of review.
I'm
Didn't
okay.
we do that last month?
If you post the financial security for it, I think that makes sense. You know, projects that have a tendency to do this, and if it doesn't have a direct impact on what you're proposing to do, I think the deferral with the necessary agreements and the financial security posted, I think that would be acceptable, or at least I would find that acceptable.
I have one question in this note that we're reading. Is the word review missing in the third line there at the end of the sentence or at the end of the word PennDOT? Or,
Yes, I believe so.
okay.
Yeah.
So can we proceed with this motion or do we need a separate motion for the other issue?
If Ron would be willing to amend his motion and Scott to second it as amended, we could just have one vote on one motion.
Okay, I certainly would amend my motion to include the escrow and the items that Kim mentioned.
I second that.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Is your cat voting?
Carries. Thank you. Anything else on the Berkshire Mall West?
So at this time, we're looking for conditional plan approval, a recommendation for conditional plan approval in order to maintain our guidelines. And that would be conditioned upon working with the borough consultants to satisfy all their outstanding comments.
So you're in the process of doing that right now?
We're requesting conditional plan approval, a recommendation for conditional plan approval from the planning commission.
And that would be subject to all items in McCarthy and TPD's review letters being addressed.
I'll just ask Jim McCarthy if the plan is far enough along. Are you comfortable with a conditional plan approval?
Sorry, I was talking muted. Yeah, I think at this point, as long as we have get all the escrows in place and then have those applicable conditions in place of the PennDOT, the emergency access easement leading to the Galen Medical Building and all that stuff would follow. I don't think there's any major planning or plan issues that are left open at this time.
Okay. Thank you.
So do we need a motion to that effect?
Yeah, motion for conditional approval subject. Jim McCarthy, is everything you just mentioned in your review letter? So if they recommend approval based on your review letter, that'll all be addressed?
The only thing I don't think is, Kim, I don't believe it is, I think we talked at the field meeting about the easement being a general easement rather than a meets and bounds.
Correct.
And that paperwork would follow. So that may be the only thing now. It's, and just to talk briefly on that, there was a concern where we previously sketched it on. They don't currently have a building, but may look to expand. So we agreed rather than impinge that the easement would just give general emergency access rights to the borough to go in and use any existing drive aisles at that time to gain access to the emergency access easement. And that way it doesn't encumber Berkshire Mall West from any future plans. And it gives us what we need from the emergency management services. So that's probably the only thing that's not in the letter, Chris.
Okay.
Are there any traffic issues that we discussed earlier that Mr. Jadik brought up that we haven't resolved here that are outstanding, or do we put that to bed?
Can I say a few words, if I may? I looked at the red lines from Kim as she was speaking. I have one little item to touch upon. Kim, you noticed that so the exit part, the right, definitely as it is now, it's better for the
Pull that
traffic.
up. Hold on one second, Adrian.
I-
Let's pull that up so everyone can see it.
Yeah, I am. Hold on.
Thanks.
Yep.
Okay, right there. So my point is here, you look from the bottom up, we have a left turn from Berkshire Mall. That car lands in right at, basically two cars merge in the same spot in one lane. So what I'm saying is, I don't know, it almost looks like we should make the Berkshire Mall exit a right turn only. I don't know, but the idea is this car turns left and there is a car coming out. They're in the same spot at the same time. That was all my comment. Just watch that. Definitely, this has improved the traffic, in my opinion. You know, the no left turn, that's a positive thing. But the left turn from Berkshire Mall at this point, it was not a problem when it was a T intersection, what I'm trying to say. But now that it's a four-legged intersection, that left turn, I don't know. Doesn't look good to me. There are two cars merging in one lane at the same spot. So, and I don't think anybody turning right will look all the way. Anyway, that's my opinion. That's what I wanted to say. I don't want to interrupt. Go ahead. Thank you.
Tim, just to clarify, the right turn coming out of the Outback, will that have a stop sign at that location?
Yeah, there's a stop sign right here.
Okay, I
This
couldn't
A,
find
yeah.
schedule on the bottom. Okay,
Yep, there's definitely a stop sign and a stop bar.
okay, thank you.
Yep.
Jim McCarthy, does your review letter incorporate by reference the TPW or TPD letter, or is that, should we include compliance with that letter review comments as part of the motion as well?
You should incorporate the PPD letter.
All right, so John, I think the motion needs to be recommend conditional plan approval subject to the most recent McCarthy review letter, the most recent TPD letter, and providing of the emergency access as discussed.
Somebody make that motion.
I'll make that motion as Chris just articulated.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
There's
Carries.
also two waivers that need to be acted on as well. The first waiver is requiring separate preliminary and final plan submissions. So this is section 303 and 305. We are proposing to combine them into one submission.
And what's the other one?
The other one is regarding plan scale. Plan scale is to be 1 inch equals 50 feet, and we're at 1 to 20. And we requested a waiver of section 401.1 and 403.3. 403.1.
I presume we have to do those separately, Chris? Or does it not have to be a motion?
You don't have to do them separately unless someone has a concern about one of them.
Okay, would somebody move that we take those actions?
I'll make a recommendation for those waivers.
Thank you, Scott. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. I don't know what that was, but any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
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 So ordered. All right, thank you. Is there anything else for the Berkshire Mall West?
Nope.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
So Jim, are you going to introduce the 3C part or 3B part of the agenda, or 3A or whatever it is?
Sure. Sure. So I believe Keith Mooney and Mike Del Palo are both on for this. They're doing basically a rearrangement of lot lines between two parcels that are 99.99% in the city of Reading, and there's a little tiny sliver that actually, when you look at the tax map, you don't even see. But there's a little. I think Mike Del Palo said 39 square feet in Wyomissing. So what typically on a matter like this, there's no construction. You can zoom in here. There's this little tiny corner in the, yeah, keep panning the way you're going.
Yep, keep going.
Keep going. Keep going. Right there. There's a little sliver in this corner, which is in Wyomissing. And typically on these matters where there's no proposed construction and they're just revising internal lot lines between the Wyomissing Park Apartments and Hummingbird Hill condos. Typically in these matters, we would recommend you defer the approval to the city of Reading, and rather than have it go through our process. Because I guess you have to go through Coomer, Reading, and us, or do Coomer defer? Mike,
No, we're on Coomer's Planning Commission and Township Commissioners meet next week, and we're on their agenda for both of these things next week.
I'd recommend that the borough defer, as Jim has suggested.
Does that mean we need to take no action?
Well, what we're
We
looking for,
should have a
Mr.
motion.
Chair, is a recommendation to your borough council so that we can request the same of them tomorrow at their meeting.
That's
Gotcha.
right. We need to make a recommendation.
to defer the approval to the city of Reading.
Right.
I'll make
Somebody
that
that
motion.
motion.
Yes.
Is there a second?
I'll second, Eric.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Can I just ask one question? Is there any operative reason why there should be any issues with this, Keith?
No, if you look where the land in Wyomissing actually is, it's where you can see all the way in the back left corner where Ridge Avenue's at. There's a confluence where Reading, Coomer, and the borough all come together. That's the portion of the project that's in the borough. That little corner where all three municipalities meet.
Are there any maintenance issues that would fall to one or the other, or who maintains this sliver?
No, the sliver is all owned by the group that owns Wyomissing Apartments.
Okay,
And it will be under the switching of land. These parcels are due to be sold as separate entities. And so there's some land where driveways are that are going to go to one entity rather than another that are currently shared.
well, then I think deferral to the other two and us follow along makes sense.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
so now we have the tower situation. Is that correct?
Correct. So I'll give the planning commission a little overview. I was approached by Verizon several months ago with their expressed interest to lease space from the borough on borough-owned utility poles, or also possibly the firehouse, to install wireless communication facilities, not towers, not the gigantic towers that we do have some of in the borough, but smaller antenna to boost cell phone service, data service, and provide a 5G network. When I received that request, it opened a conversation with the infrastructure committee that Chris and I followed up on by looking at putting some, what I'm going to call somewhat aesthetic regulations in place for what these facilities would look like. The borough already has in the zoning ordinance tower-based and non-tower-based regulations. So tower-based are exactly what they sound like. Non-tower-based are these type of facilities where they're installed on an existing support structure such as a telephone pole, a light pole, or something similar. So I went out and, pulled a couple of ordinances that exist throughout the country, pulled some standards that I thought would make sense in the borough as to size, limiting signage, co-location wherever possible, spacing, how many can be on a street, how far apart they have to be. And Chris took all of those recommendations and put them into this draft ordinance that you were sent to take a look at. Before we get too far into review of this, I had shot the draft ordinance back to Verizon just so they knew, the direction that we were leaning. Their attorney did respond with some comments that it's not going to drastically alter this ordinance if we consider, incorporating some of those comments, and some I think we need to because of FCC requirements, definitions, and time periods. But I did want to say what you're looking at on the screen and what you were provided with by email last week, there will be some amendments to, when Chris and I have that conversation as to what we want to incorporate and what we don't. And Chris, feel free to interrupt me at any point in time if you want to. That said, not knowing, how many of you have had a chance to review this in depth, I know Ron hasn't based off of his comments. What level of overview do you want us to provide the Planning Commission with at this meeting on the draft ordinance? Do you want the high level? Do you want the item by item? Do you want just the high level and wait till we incorporate some of those comments and come back at next month to get in depth?
Michelle, I have two questions.
Sure.
One, what kind of timeline does Verizon need for this?
They've been waiting for months, so another month or two is not, gonna kill anything.
Okay, and then the second question is since it's zoning, is it going to be reviewed by the county?
Yes, they already have a copy.
Okay.
The only question I would have that might be significant before you go through your redraft is have the emergency folks, fire and police, weighed in on this? And is there any potential for interference or anything that would adversely affect communications within the county and our operations, particularly in the area of the firehouse and those areas that might be affected? I don't know if they might be or not, and there's some waiver in there of that issue, but have they reviewed this and signed off on it?
They have not, only because Borough Council has not seriously entertained the lease request to put any type of facility on the firehouse. First and foremost, before we even potentially agree to a lease agreement for any location, including the firehouse, we wanted design regulations and aesthetic standards in place, which is what this ordinance is a part of. Outside of that, as part of even our existing ordinance I should say the existing section in the zoning ordinance that regulates wireless communication facilities, any applicant proposing to either install a tower or non-tower based facility or co-locate on an existing one does have to provide multiple statements of compliance with the FCC. They have to have a radio frequency engineer weigh in that, the antennas that are being installed are not going to in any way interfere with emergency broadcasting or emergency systems that are in place. So even if the borough went ahead and approved the lease agreement for the firehouse, the applicant would still have to demonstrate compliance through a radio frequency engineer showing that those facilities would not interfere in any way, shape, or form with emergency systems.
Yeah.
So it sounds like what you're saying is that if it's not in here, there would be FCC regulations or others that might impede the ability for Verizon to obtain this easement, or whatever they're looking for here for these towers. But at the end of the day, I guess it probably makes sense to have it in our own ordinance as well, doesn't it, Chris?
I think we already do, but this is an FCC licensing issue with, the frequencies are dedicated to specific users. I mean, we could certainly get input from our emergency service providers, but in my opinion, the only way that it would be possible to interfere with our existing emergency communications is if somebody was violating an FCC license and using the wrong frequency. So, and I also do believe that in our existing regulations, we already have things about the requirement that they have FCC licenses in order to get a permit to make an installation here in the borough. This ordinance doesn't address that kind of an issue, but my opinion is that it is already addressed in the pre-existing language of our regulations. But certainly we can always, confirm my understanding that we don't have a risk on that unless somebody violates federal law. But, we can certainly verify that with our emergency service providers. I want to make the planning commission aware that the draft that I put together, this ordinance, was intended to give you an overview of our existing communication regulations, communication facility regulations. So about the first half of this lengthy document is made up of the tower regulations, and there are no changes in those first 10 pages. So that's included really just for context, for your information. When we get to a version that we would advertise, I would likely exclude that first half of the ordinance because there are no changes in those sections. When we get down later, you see the highlighted area, the red area, those are the changes. And just to give you a very broad overview, what we're trying to do is to require design of these non-tower communication facilities that will blend with the existing architecture of structures in the borough. So that means that it should be flat against a facade if it's going to be on the outside of the facade, if it's possible to have it on the roof and be hidden. It should be on the roof and be hidden. In cases where there aren't existing structures and they want to install a new small structure, they have to put in a light post at a location that is agreeable to the borough, and it has to meet the standards that the borough requires for light posts that are not communication equipment bearing structures, so that it'll, again, aesthetically blend in with the existing built environment of the borough. So that's really the overview, again, with regard to the aesthetics of this, is to, like I said, make it look like it fits and that it's not a some kind of an alien structure in the borough. With that being said, if there are any specific questions right now, I would certainly offer to answer them or try to answer them. I would prefer that we would roll this over to next month because this meeting has already gone longer than I anticipated, and I have another meeting across town that I need to get to by 5 o'clock. So does anyone have any specific questions at this time?
Well, I would just reiterate that my only concern is probably less aesthetic than practical, and that relates to the ongoing updating of communications equipment among emergency service, police, fire, those guys. They're always changing frequencies to add value and accessibility. So to the extent that there's any issue, from my perspective, it's making sure that those folks are comfortable that if there are any modifications consistent with federal law or anything else, that those things do not impact the current operational footprint that Berks County uses, especially our folks in that regard. So the aesthetics, I'm good with the aesthetics. It's really the practical functionality and the relationship between Verizon and our emergency service providers is more important to me than the aesthetic issue.
Okay,
Okay. Chris has taken note of that, and we will, after they go over the ordinance and with the input from Verizon, whatever, we'll bring something back to us to consider for next month. That okay with everybody?
Sounds good.
All
thank
right.
you.
Is there anything else on the agenda?
Not unless anybody has anything miscellaneous.
Yeah. Does anybody have any miscellaneous?
No.
Okay.
Nope.
Thank you. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you, one and all.
Thank
Right,
you.
Thank you.